Hello, this is Dr. Grande. Welcome to the murder part. Tonight we'll be looking at the case of Ronnie O'Neal III. So I'm here tonight with Jeff Pincin Jr.
Hey everybody, good to be on here.
And Mike Smith.
Yep. Good evening.
So what do you guys think about Ronnie O'Neal? This is a case that's been covered, I think, by a channel in Florida that had all of the footage from the trial. It was really amazing. It was a lot of footage.
There's a lot of footage.
If we didn't have the recordings, I mean, it would have been at least half of what it was, given his behavior in court, all the details of it. So if we didn't have those videos, this would be much different.
Yeah, and nobody would believe what would happen if they're just getting court reporters screamed at jury. Nobody screams at a jury. What are you talking about? There's
no way he represented himself. No.
Yeah, there's something about, even if I have a transcript when I'm, looking through resources, I was working on the Britney Spears update, and it was recorded, and you could listen to the whole recording, but I mostly used the transcript. But then I went back and listened anyway, because there's something that the transcript just doesn't capture, the way somebody talks. And I think you're right. I mean, in this case, if you just heard the reports, you'd be like, all right, some guy who killed people, it's terrible, but it's not really an unusual case, unfortunately. But when you see it on video, it's shocking. Yeah. It really is. So let's take a look at some...
Not the murder. We don't see the murder on video. You see,
right,
you see the court proceedings.
Right, yeah.
Just the court proceedings.
I'm sure the murder was shocking too, but yes, that's something different. But yeah, Ronnie O'Neal in court representing himself. So he was both a defendant and a lawyer at the same time. Well, acting as a lawyer.
Acting as a lawyer. He's not actually a lawyer, does not have any legal training officially.
I guess you could call him a jailhouse lawyer, right?
Potentially. I mean, he does have some criminal background from an earlier age, some offenses that landed him in some minor stints here and there.
So let's take a look. Let's take a look at his history. There's not a lot available. And of course, this case, when you search for it, of course, you're going to get all the most recent information. I really had to dig to find the original reports. And oddly, it wasn't really covered that much. I mean, you're talking about a double homicide, a horrible crime, and an attempted murder.
Yeah.
And, we made the news, of course, but there was no effort to find out about who Ronnie O'Neal really was, his background. There's really very little interest in this case until he represented himself. So Ronnie O'Neal was born...
I think the yelling and screaming at the jury was the bigger draw on that one. I think that even with his wild hair, if just representing himself wouldn't have been enough to get really the public attention on that one, it was the opening statement. But we'll go into his background first.
Yeah, he definitely made an impression on everybody. So Ronnie O'Neal was born on July 27, 1988. And his criminal history is a little murky. It looks like he had a conviction for misdemeanor drug possession, two separate ones, 2008, 2009, and a driving with a suspended license, also in 2009. And then we see a conspiracy to traffic cocaine back in 2007, but no disposition. Mm-hmm. So not enough evidence. It was dropped, or he took some deal. Who knows? We don't know. Could have been convicted, just not clear. Moving to 2018, we see that Ronnie, this is the year of the crime. He is 29 years old. His girlfriend is 33. Her name is Kenyatta Barron. And they have two children. And, of course, they reside in Tampa, Florida. That's where this case takes place. And we see that so he has a daughter and a son, 9-year-old daughter. She's disabled. There are various reports about the disability. I saw one that said autism. I saw another one that said cerebral palsy. Of course, both could be at play. I don't know.
Most of the reports I've seen have said she was non-communicative. Right. She could not communicate. So whether it was autism spectrum disorder or cerebral palsy, she couldn't talk. She was 9 years old and could not communicate very well.
And then we have an 8-year-old son, and he turns out to be a hero in this case. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Right. When now, of course, he's 11. So we see conflicting reports about the mental health history for Ronnie O'Neal. This is one of the great mysteries of this case because, when you see him kind of doing his thing, you wonder, okay, is there something going on with personality, reality testing, something going on? And we really don't have any information except he was initially determined as incompetent to move forward in court proceedings, but that was quickly changed. And he has said There's no mental health history. He's never taken medications, never been prescribed medications. All right, so this takes us to what happened.
And I wouldn't be surprised if he'd never spoken, if he'd only spoken to a counselor or another clinician briefly in connection with some of the misdemeanor criminal trafficking stuff, or while he was in holding or something like that. But probably only like minimally contacted.
Or maybe in school or something too. I don't know what kind of services potentially he got in school, maybe. So there's a lot of unknowns.
Yeah, so there may be something going on, there may not be. We just don't know. So at 11:43 p.m. on March 18, and this is in Hillsborough County where Tampa is, the police are called to the O'Neal residence. They had received a call from O'Neal's girlfriend, Kenyatta Barron. She said she'd been shot. Now, in the background, Ronnie's yelling, "Allahu Akbar."
Yeah, he's screaming that in the background, and the recordings that they have from the 911 call, he's repeating it over and over and over again. And he says it 8 or 9 times in the background, just over and over.
Which means God is great in Arabic,
yes.
Right?
Yeah, and it's often used in it can be used in kind of a militaristic context.
And it is important to note that at least one source that I saw said that Ronnie O'Neal does identify as being a member of the Nation of Islam. So that's not an unusual thing to hear him say. I think that because that is related to his religious convictions. But the way he was screaming it on the 911 call, just over and over and over and over again, is a bit unusual.
It has a combat context to it, right? Yeah. So I'm sure it has usage. I mean, I don't know. Maybe it has usage that doesn't involve that, but we know it can be used by like extremists when they're carrying out some type of terrible act. So not really clear. I don't know how he was trying to use it, but either way, it's something to consider as part of the case. At 11:51 p.m., so just a few minutes later, Ronnie O'Neal calls 911.
Yep.
It says that white demons are attacking him, right? And they're coming from his girlfriend. He said she tried to kill me, and I just killed her. So here we see the seeds of a defensive strategy we see later on.
Yeah.
Although he modifies it a little bit.
He does.
Yeah. I don't think there's any mention of the demons later on.
No, I don't think there is, because he did try to steer clear of any kind of mental health or insanity type of defense or play. Like he tried to make sure that everyone knew he was stable. And it's actually one of the statements he made was, "I stand here stable as can be, competent to do this."
Yeah, he has really sidestepped the mental health stuff repeatedly. Mm-hmm. Even before this, we see when he was talking to the judge, we'll get to some of the statements he made that were very unusual, but he's denying any mental health history. So that's a key part of his strategy. He's someone who is stable, in control, his thoughts are straight and organized, and he's trying to present this defense where he killed Kenyatta Barron because she killed the daughter, and I presumably attacked the son.
That does seem to ultimately be his claim as part of his defense, was that Kenyatta had been taken over at the time, been taken over by white demons. He doesn't mention that in the court case, but that's the 911 call. But it seems that his defense was relying on she killed the daughter and attacked the son, so he tried to defend his kids, and that's why he killed her.
Now, when Ronnie made the call to police, the police were already there, if I'm not mistaken. They had been there for 2 minutes or so when he called 911.
Yeah, so they were waiting outside, which is a strategy that we see quite a bit. They get their bearings, I guess. Although we've seen some terrible examples where the police never did anything. But I think in this case they were just trying to.
Well, Kenyatta was outside.
They're attending to her. She was on the sidewalk.
Yeah.
Yeah, from what I understand from much of the testimony from the police and from Ronnie's son was that she ran out of the house, and he followed her with the shotgun and shot her just outside of the house.
He actually beat her to death, I believe, with the shotgun. He ran out of ammunition.
He shot her as she was running away outside of the house. That was made clear with the the testimony of the son that they ran out of the house and then the shotgun shots happened. He ran out of ammo, and she was calling the police on her cell phone, and then he came up and used the shotgun to apparently beat her until she died. There is a discrepancy between how many times. Ronnie says he hit her 2 or 3 times
instead of 15
with the
to
shotgun,
17, right?
and the medical examiner said it was 15 to 17 blows with the shotgun.
Yeah, so my understanding is when the police come up, they see kind of a light emerging in the house, and they're initially confused. Did somebody turn on a light? Then they realize it's a fire. So they're attending to Kenyatta Barron. Other officers are breaking into the house. As soon as they force entry, the garage door starts to open. And we see Ronnie O'Neal strolls out, walking toward them, unarmed, but he was not respecting the commands to stop and go on the ground. So they tasered him and convinced him to come into custody there.
Convinced him with force.
Right, with electricity.
They convinced him with 10,000 volts of electricity. Or possibly way more. I don't know what their tasers are set to. But yeah, that is an interesting way of convincing someone to comply with your orders. But it was definitely a less than lethal takedown. He was not permanently harmed from it, and they didn't do anything beyond that. They took him into custody. But I think it was interesting that happened like almost immediately after that. Was his son came walking out of the house. He'd been burned and he had been stabbed himself repeatedly, and he had survived the attack and was walking out of the house.
Yeah, and the first thing he said to, I believe it was the paramedics, but it's not clear, was that his father shot his mother.
Yeah.
So I've seen many versions of that. In quotes, it's interesting, like different articles had, like mommy or daddy shot mommy, dad shot mom. But the first source I could find said his father shot his mother. So
the message seemed to remain the same for each
right.
of those. Is that what you're saying?
There seems no doubt about his testimony.
Yeah,
like he saw it and he knew it, and that was it. Fortunately, he did survive. He had burns over 30% of his body, and a homicide detective actually adopted him.
Yeah, that homicide detective did recuse himself from the case after he decided to take the boy in, which I do respect. But that was a big point that Ronnie O'Neal would then later use in his argument.
Yeah, I think it was certainly noble and probably very beneficial for the 8-year-old. I think this case was so solid that no one was worried about the little tiny bit that could muddy the water. Mm-hmm. If this was right on the fence with evidence, you might wonder, because we've seen other cases where detectives have done that and police officers done that. And the good probably outweighs that small risk that a juror is going to say, well, I don't know, it seems like they're muddying things up with that. Yeah. It didn't matter here.
Yeah, I think that just the preponderance of evidence was there from the door that it really didn't matter.
Yeah, this was a short putt for the prosecution. Mm-hmm. They thought it was very easy. They probably didn't foresee the whole Ronnie representing himself piece.
Right.
All right, so the couple's daughter was found in the home, and she had been murdered.
Yes. She had been attacked with a hatchet or tomahawk or some other small axe type of weapon. It's unclear. The police officer, or one of the police reports, refers to it as a tomahawk, another refers to it as a hatchet, and somebody else refers to it as just an axe. But it was some type of axe-bladed implement that was used to kill her, and then she also had burned some.
Yeah, so a horrible crime, which I think sometimes gets lost in this case because we're so fixated on Ronnie O'Neal and his, quite frankly, ridiculous behavior in court that it almost seems comical. But there's a terrible, tragic crime that occurred that brought him to court.
Yeah.
Right. So in that sense, he did make himself look better because people are laughing at him and not focusing on the crime anymore.
So the basic timeline is that at a certain point in the evening, Ronnie O'Neal and Kenyatta Barron started having some sort of argument or heated discussion. Ronnie O'Neal then grabbed the shotgun. Kenyatta runs out of the home. And this is the prosecution's timeline. So Kenyatta runs out of the home. Ronnie O'Neal follows her, shoots her several times until he runs out of ammo. He very likely missed several of those shots. Kenyatta's on the phone as she's leaving the house. Probably is struck just before making contact with 911. That's when she says, I was shot. She falls to the ground. Ronnie walks over, uses the shotgun to bludgeon her to death. He then turns around, goes back in the house, takes the hatchet, axe-like implement, and kills the daughter. He had at some point had told his son to go get him a knife and get him a bunch of other things. The boy did go get a knife and had it. Ronnie took the knife from him, stabbed him with it, and then grabbed a gas can, started pouring gasoline all over, poured it all over his daughter and some on his son, and then lit the place on fire. And while he was doing this, he called 911 himself. And then the police showed up just as the fire was starting to catch. And he comes walking out of the thing. This is the prosecution's timeline of events.
Yeah. And it's I think, strongly supported by the evidence gathered at the scene and the eyewitness testimony. It really does seem kind of like a slam dunk. I know there's always things that can happen in trial, but this one seems pretty clear. Mm-hmm. Not really a big mystery with this case.
Right.
So,
I mean, prosecutors were pretty ready to, move forward with the case almost immediately. Like they said, we've got everything. Let's move forward. Let's set a date. But one of the surprising things that happened was Ronnie O'Neal was evaluated for competence to stand trial. And he was found by clinicians to be not competent to stand trial. Mm-hmm. Like at that time, at that point, right after the crime had been committed, clinicians apparently felt that he didn't understand enough to be able to help in his own defense.
Which is interesting considering what happens later.
Yeah. Which is very interesting considering his stance on the mental health stuff.
Do we know anything about the clinicians? I hadn't heard that it was clinicians.
We don't. It was they were court-ordered clinicians who evaluated to see whether or not he was competent enough to stand trial. But there's no additional information has been released about what exactly they may have talked about or how they came to that decision. Right. But we know that they made that decision, and it was 2 years before he was reevaluated and found to be finally found to be competent to stand trial.
Yeah, and of course he remained in custody the whole time.
Mm-hmm.
The second time he was found competent, everything I read said that the judge found him competent. Did you guys read anything different? Because I'm curious.
Ultimately it has to be a judge.
Ultimately
the clinicians make a recommendation. It's often respected, but the judge has the final say.
Well, I'm curious if it was 2 years prior and they saw that, not fit to stand trial. 2 years after that, the judge makes a different call. I'm curious how that happened in this case. I'm not sure that we know necessarily, but I'm curious how that happened.
I do think that in certain states, I don't know how it is in Florida, but they reevaluate every so often. When somebody is found to be not competent to stand trial, because it doesn't happen often. There's not a list of 10,000 people who are sitting on the non-competent list. Like it's a very short list of people, so they'll come up and have them reevaluated at certain intervals, or they tend to not be held in prisons, but in mental health facilities where they're evaluated repeatedly throughout their stay there. And eventually, if a clinician who's with them writes a report and says, "Yes, I think this person is finally competent," then that report goes to the judge and they're found.
Does anybody know what happens in Florida?
I do not.
Yeah, no, okay.
No.
Because you said I don't know how it happens in Florida.
I don't know a lot of things about what happens in Florida, and I try to keep it that way. I've seen enough Florida man headlines to know. Like I don't want to.
There are a number of high-profile cases that come out of Florida.
There's quite a few. That in Utah.
Yes. Yeah. Well, there was a special a while back where Piers Morgan interviewed a number of female killers, and I forget how many there were in the special, but it was, I think, almost all of them were Florida cases, like all but maybe one. I'm like, did he just did he just like drop into Florida and say, let me find some killers? Or like, how did that work that they were all concentrated in Florida? I don't know.
You got Florida man and Florida woman. And you can do searches on them all day long, and you'll find some stuff, some out there stuff. At 2 years, I believe he was in a mental health facility, receiving some sort of treatment, and he was then found competent to stand trial again. And then the trial was scheduled for recently.
Right. So yeah, we see.
I don't remember what the date that it started. It was only like a couple weeks ago.
When it was approaching, there's a lot of hearings to get to an actual trial. Not just jury selection. There's tons of motions that are typically filed before that about what can get in and procedurally what can happen. Ronnie O'Neal was represented by attorneys the entire time.
Mm-hmm. He was represented. He had 2 attorneys at least who were representing him from the moment that he was found competent until I think just before the trial started. And they did depositions. They got depositions from his son, from detectives on the case, from paramedics. They were creating a case for his defense. And then right before the trial started,
that's when he tells the judge.
He said, I want to represent myself.
And the judge seemed pretty surprised.
Everybody seemed pretty surprised. Yeah. I'm pretty sure his lawyers were surprised at that point. I mean, they weren't in the courtroom at that point, but so they might have been told probably a few minutes before, you're not coming in. I don't know. I don't have any evidence to make that statement. But
he did jury selection.
Yeah,
he was representing himself.
He was from the moment they stepped into the courtroom, he was by himself. But yeah, he made that decision, told the judge. And the judge was like, are you sure you want to do this? He said yes.
Yeah. So proceeding pro se, of course, very, very bad idea, no matter what the evidence, whether it's an easy case to win and fewer easy to win, because the prosecution has enough to indict. But
and we always remember the wise words that are attributed to Abraham Lincoln, the man who chooses to represent himself as a fool for a client.
That's right.
Of course, it's also said that Lincoln said, don't believe everything you read on the internet.
Yeah, so O'Neal ignored the judge's advice. She gave good advice, which was stick with your attorneys.
Yeah.
And essentially forget this whole idea. But he didn't. And he managed to convince her that he understood the consequences of what he was going to do and that he had the sufficient educational level. I don't know what would be considered sufficient, but he was there. So now we move to...
My speculation is that his attorneys really wanted to push for an insanity defense. They really wanted to try and get behind this whole, you were out of your mind, you didn't know what was going on, you thought you were doing the right thing, even if it ended up being wrong, you thought you were doing the right thing. And Ronnie was just like, no, we're not going that route. And I think they pushed it so much, trying to convince him that he just finally said, nope, you're out. You get out.
I think that's plausible. I think I think they're public defenders.
Yeah.
Right.
I also think there's a trust issue there because he showed a lot of mistrust of a lot of different things. And so it probably was not a lot of cajoling by the attorneys that was needed for him to make that decision.
He didn't seem to be a fan of attorneys.
Just in general.
A fan of really anybody. He's a pretty cantankerous individual. But I can see the public defenders just kind of sitting with him, to your point, to your theory, and saying, "Remember the white demons. Remember where we started with this. Let's not forget the white demons in this." And you could picture Ronnie saying, no,
I don't want to go that way. No, I don't want to do that. But the screaming of, Allahu Akbar, the screaming of that in the background, 8, 10, 12 times, you're screaming it. Let's go with this insanity defense. And you're fired. Get out.
Yeah, so he didn't. He went with a self-defense case. And we see here some great, he had some, great meaning funny, not great good or meaningful in a positive way, but he had some great lines that he delivered really all throughout the...
I do think that there are some points that we can see where Ronnie O'Neal, shows that he actually does have quite a bit of intelligence throughout his opening statement, because he repeatedly says the phrase, "the evidence will show." And this is something that any first year lawyer, like just out of law school, that's how they make their opening statements. Like, the evidence will show, the evidence will show, the evidence will show, before they make any statement. More seasoned attorneys have different ways of phrasing it and things like that.
But stuck with that. It's become a meme.
But
right?
as the evidence will show. But that's what I just passed the bar. This is my first trial. The evidence will show. The evidence will show. Like, that's what they say over and over and over again. So Ronnie does that. Like, he says it over and over and over. And he does have some relatively coherent points to his defense when he comes up with them. He does try to muddy the waters with supposition about how his son may have been coached into saying things because the detective on the case adopted him and things like that. And he tries to make it up. But yeah, he does have some really out there stuff. And like, his whole demeanor is just really out there when he starts his statement, because he starts out by scowling at the jury. Like, throughout the whole thing, he's scowling.
I think that was his only facial expression, pretty much.
At least throughout the opening statement. Yeah. I think later on, during some of his cross-examinations, he had a much more neutral face. But during his entire opening statement, he was just scowling. And I think like that's the number one thing that I think, not necessarily that the evidence couldn't convict him, because the evidence surely could convict him, but I think he right there like failed. Just scowling at the jury, just they're not going to like him.
No,
they're going to be like, well, he's screaming and yelling.
I'd be surprised if they liked him. Now his central case, though, was that the government, they're a bunch of liars, right? That his son was coached, as you mentioned, and that could be involved with the whole adoption situation of the detective. He also said the evidence is going to show that I love my children. I don't think the evidence actually shows that at all.
Maybe he had different evidence.
He had some magic evidence that was never presented.
From the evidence that I've seen, he did say that he was the one who fought for his daughter to stay on life support when she was born. So, I mean, I suppose that could qualify, but
I mean, I guess there's many definitions of love.
Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, it's a subjective word. But
I think that, he has been found guilty, so I don't really need to say alleged, but yeah, he stabbed his son and hit his daughter repeatedly with a hatchet. That's not any kind of love that I would like to experience in my life.
Yeah.
Given his the language that he used and how he addressed all of this, I wonder if he felt like, through spending time with his attorneys, if he felt like he understood where they were going with this, like the language that they would use, but didn't quite have maybe the social part of it, like how people would perceive him. So he goes out and he scowls and he yells and he uses profanity and whatever else. And so maybe he's got the language and maybe he's got the arguments, which maybe he picked up from somebody else. But everything else, the part that really did him in, all the other stuff, maybe he didn't quite get that. And I wonder if that's what we're seeing.
Yeah, that's all pure Ronnie.
Yeah,
he's pure Ronnie.
Pure Ronnie.
Is really angry.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know if he was or not, that was an act, but he certainly seemed angry. And there's no attorneys. I mean, there's some pretty good TV shows that represent attorneys, like Law and Order. There's no attorneys on there that scream at the jury. There's no role model for that anywhere. Look at Matlock. Matlock didn't do that.
Matlock never screamed at a jury. Like, he might have thought about it sometimes, but he never did.
I think what we need here is a Nickelodeon show, an accurate representation of attorneys, just for this reason, so that up-and-coming generations know, wait a minute, I'm not supposed to scream.
I'm not
they
supposed
didn't
to
do
scream.
This. Okay,
I'm not supposed to scream at the jury.
I get it now.
Right? I think that he did demonstrate in many of his arguments that big distrust of the government. And given his attorneys were, public defenders, it's not a surprise that he ended up firing them, because they were part of that system.
Yeah, he probably saw them in league with the detective and the prosecutors.
It might have been very much a sense of, well, they're trying to push this because they want to, they're trying to get one over me. This is their corrupt strategy. This is all supposition. I don't know exactly, but it seems likely to me that he saw them as part of the system, and that their defense strategy was going to be the way the government got him, and that he was going to have to take the horse by the reins.
Yeah, he was really kind of coming off as the aggressor who was wronged. And I think you see it well at a few different points. There's one particular point I wanted to make, though, where I think you really saw it. We referenced this before, where he struck Kenyatta Barron 3 times. He admitted that. Now, he also admitted he killed her. That's a different story. But he admitted that he struck her 3 times. And he said that he did not strike her the 15 to 17 times that the state was alleging during the trial. And he said that whoever caused the extra lacerations on her face was definitely going to pay. So he was trying to take the stance like, you need to punish the real aggressor. Whoever really, I must have hit her. I hit her 3 times. Okay, but then there's somebody else.
I hit her 3 times. I killed her. But the person who put those extra lacerations, that's the person.
How does he fit the homicide part in? Like, right. Even if you want to say, look, I'm bad, but I'm not that bad, which was basically his defense. How does he sneak the homicide in there and have the jury say, oh, we'll forgive that because, somebody else, there's a mystery assailant that we need to catch.
It's kind of like him saying, I really love my daughter. Well, it sounds like you're saying you really love your girlfriend, too. But we know you killed her. So extra lacerations, maybe not a big deal.
Yeah, he wasn't selling it too well.
The interesting thing, I think, like he, up to a certain point, he, in his opening statement, he did not say that he killed Kenyatta. And he was very careful to avoid that. And at one point, when he's trying to put, he's trying to build some sense of trying to undermine the credibility of his son's testimony. And he says, my son will say, the evidence will show, my son will say that I shot, or something like it was recorded that my son said that I shot his mother. And he says to himself, which would be a true statement. And then he pauses for a beat and then goes, if he even said it. like he pauses for a beat and realizes, like, oh my goodness, I just told the jury that my son's going to say that I shot his mother. I haven't admitted to that yet, so now I've got to, like, he didn't say that. Like, if he even said, I got to cast a shadow of doubt on if he said that. It's like it very much was it wasn't an incoherent argument, but there were a lot of points where he just was contradicting himself.
See, the story that he wanted to tell wasn't really, certainly would be the job of an attorney to tell it. But this would have been one of those cases where you would think that he would testify on his own behalf, even though that's almost always a bad idea. You would think he would have done it just to get...
I've never seen a case where that was a good idea.
No, it's yeah. Well, there's a few cases, low evidence cases, where you could...
I've seen jurors who said, well, I really wish I could have heard from him say something, but every time I see somebody get on the stand and and testify themselves, they're found guilty.
Yeah, on cross-examination, they have a rough time, right? Because there was enough evidence to charge them, so there's going to be enough to question their story and hit them with inconsistencies, and attorneys are good at drawing that out on cross. Mm-hmm. I think, though, that he really wanted to tell his story. I'm surprised he didn't just go all the way and get on the stand and then lay out the exact, okay, what are the events, because the evidence didn't show this, what are the events where this is self-defense? Because we're not getting it from any of the actual evidence at the scene, so we could get it from him testifying for himself. That's the only place we're going to get it.
I imagine if he went up on the stand and they said, well, you're representing yourself, so you can't really question yourself, he would say, yes, I can. And he would probably go up on the stand, run back down, and say, now, Ronnie, run back up.
Yes, Ronnie.
Yeah, exactly. I could picture that. He seems like the kind of guy.
I think he would. But in most pro se cases, if a defendant is choosing to represent themselves and they want to testify themselves, they bring in someone else to ask the questions to them. Like they'll come up with an assistant anyway. Yeah, they'll come up with and they'll write down all their own questions that they want to be asked, but they'll have someone else ask them those questions, so they don't have the Bugs Bunny moment with it's like Bugs, yes, Bugs, jumping back and forth, because that's just silly, ridiculous. But it would be funny to see that. But
I would like to.
Right.
So one of the things
but we didn't see that in this case. Ronnie did not do that. He chose not to testify.
Yeah, he didn't. He didn't self-incriminate on the witness stand. He did it everywhere else.
Yes. Yeah.
he raised the bar for. Okay. So one last thing I want to touch on, and I'm trying to get in the mind, the thought processes of this jury, because they've just experienced something pretty horrible, and they got the yelling. Now, in the closing argument, there was actually profanity. The judge stepped in.
The judge told him to stop.
And he went after the prosecutor. He had the scowl, and he was looking right at the prosecutor, and you could he seemed like he was an inch from just going for it, just attacking. And
but well before that, the one of the big things I think that got media attention was when he cross-examined his son.
Oh yeah,
like his son was brought in to as a witness because he survived the attack, and his son was not in the courtroom. He was testifying through remote, and the prosecutor. He was a great witness for the prosecution. He was amazing. He was very solid on everything he said. Everything he said he witnessed. Was really good with answering questions. Ronnie's tactic with him wasn't to go on attack. I mean, he came up and was very cordial. He said, "Hey, it's nice to see you, man." And his son was like, "It's nice to see you too." And but his tactic was to bring up the depositions that had been taken and interviews with him when he was right after the hospital and when he was still in the hospital, and saying like, "This is what you said on this date. And this is what you said on this date, and they're different."
And do you remember saying
this?
this?
And do you remember saying this? Do you remember saying this? So he was bringing in, he was saying, "Do you remember saying this?" And then would read off of the transcript so that the jury could hear what was supposedly recorded at that time. And most of the time, his son said, "No, I don't remember that." But I think one of the star moments was when he says, "Did I hurt you?" And his son says, "Yes, you did." And he goes, "I did?"
That's right. Which almost seems like a little confession, but it's not. I mean, he was repeating
that. He was just repeating. And then he's like, "How did I hurt you?" And he's like, "You stabbed me." Like,
that's right.
He's like, "I stabbed you." But yeah, that was kind of the to me, I was like, "Oh my God," he's like, he really was like, "I did?" Like it was almost a question, but not quite. Like it's very much a statement, but you could hear almost the little lilt at the end of it. I did. But yeah, that was an interesting moment in the trial, just watching that. And Ronnie did have the transcripts in front of him. He was, and the prosecutor was kind of thrown aback by that at the moment when he started asking. He's like, "We don't have what are you referencing? What is he referencing?" And Ronnie told him, "It's like, it's on this thing and on this page, this line." And they were like, "Oh, okay." And they pulled it out and they were like, "Okay." And they followed right along with it. And every time he changed to a different thing, he was like, it was this. And he was really trying to stay on the ball with it. I mean, it was a little bit, if it had been an attorney who had prepared this in advance, it would have gone much faster. But he was standing there and there would be minutes of him standing, looking at the paper and flipping through papers and just... He became very long and drawn out and awkward. But his point was to try and undermine the credibility of his son's testimony by showing that on different occasions he was saying different things.
That went on for about an hour.
Yeah.
So I was thinking about that. And
I think about a half hour of that was Ronnie just staring at the papers.
the pause.
The pausing in between each question.
And so here you have your 11-year-old son who's now been adopted by somebody else. And he referenced his new dad and actually called him his new dad. So that's got to be weird for both of them, for both son and for Ronnie. And
Ronnie, I think during his opening statement, he mentioned that he was thankful that his son was being taken care of.
Yeah, I think he thanked the detective at one point.
Yeah, when the detective came up to testify as a witness, he when he started the cross-examination, he started with, "I want to thank you for taking care of my son."
So for about an hour, he's doing all this, and the part where he originally wasn't referencing what he was reading, and the judge had to coach him. You have to tell them where you're at, and because obviously he doesn't know, so he didn't learn that part from Ronnie.
He didn't
Ronnie
watch enough
Law
from
School.
Matlock.
Yeah, he didn't get it from any TV show, so he had to be coached throughout that. You have to reference it. You have to tell everyone where you're at, and so forth. And he didn't quote them very well. I was confused about what he was trying to say.
Yeah.
Maybe because I couldn't hear it too well, but it also sounded like he wasn't really speaking very clearly. So
Well, after the opening statement, the camera people turned the volume down on his microphone stuff.
They had to adjust.
They turned it way down. Like that's why if you watch the YouTube video of his opening statement, it's really hard to hear, even if you crank the volume up, because they turned the gain way down because he was screaming.
Right. Yeah.
So every time he stepped up to speak, they did the same thing, which is a problem with the videos of him doing the cross-examination, because he wasn't screaming.
Right.
He was actually, and he was leaning into the microphone and was still coming up as really low because they turned the gain down.
I don't think he was talking very clearly either. Either way,
he wasn't.
It was very tough for me to understand it, all right, as an adult. So I'm imagining, as an 11-year-old, here you are talking to your dad who stabbed you, who set you on fire, who killed your mom, and
your sister.
And trying to talk to his dad, and with these very confusing questions. He was quoting, but not quoting very well. And I think by the end, but I'm pretty sure by the end, the judge and everybody else was kind of tired of it. Like,
well, she did try to prompt, like she was basically reiterating the question to his son. She's just like, the question is, do you remember saying that? Yes, no, or I don't remember. Like, that's the thing. She had to say that like 4 or 5 times. It might have been 3. Like she said it. She said it a bunch, and like always was like, I don't remember. Like, no.
And so it didn't. Maybe it was a tactic of his or something, trying to just confuse him, or I'm not really sure. But for a father to do that to his son, and of course Ronnie knows he's guilty, but I didn't see any idea there that Ronnie had any compassion for his son in that moment. Here I am cross-examining my son for an hour, and I didn't get any idea there that Ronnie had any thought about, wait a second, what's my son feeling through this? Maybe I should ease up a little. Maybe I should stop doing this. I know he's representing himself. I know he wants to come off as innocent or whatever he's trying to do. But that was the strangest thing to watch, trying to think of it through the 11-year-old's eyes.
From the way he handled himself in his opening statement and in the closing statement, to me, it seemed like he was absolutely sure of his not guilt. Like, he knew that he killed Kenyatta Barron, but to him, it was self-defense, and like anyone should clearly see it. I don't think that was an act for him. I don't think he had just come up with, oh, well, I'm going to do self-defense. Like, I really think that he believed that. Because I really do think that part of the mental health issues had him seeing that at the time. And that is one of the reasons why he was found not competent, is because he, at the time. And that's why an insanity defense probably would have been at best one way to go. And it's at this point I do want to mention that insanity is a legal term, not a mental health term. It is a term that references if a person is capable of distinguishing right from wrong at the time of the commission of an action. Right. If he really thought that there were demons inside Kenyatta Barron, and his daughter and son, like if he really thought that because of a delusional set-in or something like that, then killing them was, to him, in that moment, not a wrong thing to do. Mm-hmm. And that's why the insanity defense, it's very hard to prove that. But I think that he would have had a way better chance of seeing time in a mental health facility than jail for the rest of his life. But part of that paranoia,
of released someday, but he would have still gone away for essentially life. I mean, you're talking. And this is something I talk about a lot in my videos with insanity, knowing from right from wrong. If we look at like John Hinckley Jr., now he's out, right? He was released, the guy who shot Reagan. Mm-hmm. Mark David Chapman, I don't think he's ever getting out. He's been denied appeal many times. He shot John Lennon and killed him. But, in both those cases, you can make a pretty good argument that there were actual delusions. It's, I think, mostly agreed upon that they were delusional. Mm-hmm. We could say, maybe Ronnie was delusional. Who knows? I mean, he's not saying that, but it's possible he was. But even if we were to go there, the argument becomes from a legal perspective, from a societal perspective. Okay, so you kill people for one reason instead of another. You kill people, but it wasn't really your fault. It was a disease. Okay, you still can't be free. So it's really just change of venue, mental health unit in a prison, or general population in a prison. or secure housing unit or something. Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, I think
it also does determine like whether it's the rest of your life or
right. That would be the thing. Like if you look at John Hinckley Jr., I mean, he actually is on YouTube. He has a channel where I think he plays songs. Like he has a guitar or something. I don't know. I just saw it like quickly, but a lot of people thought he would never and should never be released, right? But he was found not guilty by reason of insanity, so that's a little different. Now, and after John Hinckley Jr., you don't see that anymore. It's very rare that happens.
Very rare.
Yeah, that pretty much did it because that was on video. Like everybody saw him, and really, the reasons become academic. I mean, we can't have people going around shooting people,
especially not presidents.
Right. I mean, yeah, it's just something society couldn't tolerate. Mm-hmm. So,
but Ronnie, I think that one of the reasons he did that was he was convinced of his own, that it wasn't a wrong thing for him to have done at the time. Right. And again, it does speak to a little bit of a self-focused mind that he wasn't, considering the emotional impact on his son. Mm-hmm. But remember, he's been estranged from that child for several years now. And it's no guarantee that they were exceptionally close before that. I mean, he said they spent time together. I think at one point he says that he was, before he got there and the argument broke out, he and his son had been over at his mother's house all day, fixing a car. He was putting new brakes on his aunt's car, and he was doing it all day. And then he got home, and Kenyatta had been arguing with somebody else, his other child's mother. And the argument had been because they were trying to, Ronnie was trying to remain cordial with his other child's mother, just because they have a child together. And apparently Kenyatta Barron didn't like that, or didn't like having to have that woman in her life. And they had been having a text argument most of the day. So he got home and argument starts. And then, I don't know, one thing leads to another and things go really, really wrong in Ronnie's mind.
And even if we go and say, okay, I was thinking about this, even if we go and say there's psychosis, and that explains why he felt like he had to kill his girlfriend, why his daughter? I mean, he's saying Kenyatta Barron killed his daughter, and he has to know that's not true. Yeah. He has to know he actually did that. He did that after he killed her, right? According to the prosecutor's timeline. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, even like I said, it's probably academic, but even if one would argue that okay, maybe he was psychotic, he has kind of a big hole in the insanity defense as well, with the second murder. So it's a problematic case. I don't think it was winnable, no matter.
I don't think it. I think that there was just so much evidence that there was testimony from people who lived in the neighborhood who saw him doing this. There was the 911 recordings that they played for the jury during the opening statement and during the closing statement. And in his opening statement, he said, "I said Allahu Akbar once, maybe twice." They have me saying it on the recording 8 or 9 times. Right. They put that there.
I guess they just put it on a loop.
Yeah, apparently they supposedly, and I think that was one of his arguments, that they lifted him saying it and just put it on repeat in the background of the recording so that they can make him seem crazy, so they can make him seem guilty.
He does enough of that on his own?
He did do quite a bit of that on his own. Yeah.
All right, so now moving to the jury. I want to talk about the jury reaction, as I mentioned before. But one kind of last detour before we get to that part is a few other potential mental health items that were discovered, potential, not, again, he's denying any mental health history, but were discovered in his conversation with the judge. He told the judge, this was before the trial, that he had been murdered a couple times before. So I don't know if that was to say, look, I have some experience with this.
And he did mention in his opening statement that Kenyatta Barron had murdered him several times. Yeah. She killed me a few times.
That's usually something you only get to experience one time.
You guys haven't been murdered before?
No, I've never experienced being murdered.
Okay. Wow. All right. I'll leave it there then.
Jeff's the only one.
And he also said that the Most High God told him not to use a lawyer.
So. And he had a tagline throughout his opening and closing statements as well that was "I may walk alone, but I'm backed by a powerful God." and I can't do it here, but you have to watch the video because he screams it in his opening statement. The first time he says it, he's like, I may walk alone. And then he just screams, but I am backed by a powerful God. And like almost everybody you can see on camera is just like, whoa.
I thought, I don't remember this line. It made me think of a line that he had that I think is something he said. But I thought he said something to the effect at one point that reminded me of, was it Maximus Decimus Meridius in The Gladiator? Russell Crowe's character had that famous line, I'll get my revenge in this life or the next. Mm-hmm. Didn't he say something about
the next trial?
Yeah, the next
trial. He says, you will find me guilty, or you will find me not guilty in this trial or the next. Like he's already I'm going to lose this trial, but there's going to be another one on appeal. Like, I'm sure of that. So.
So yet more Gladiator-inspired defense talk, I guess. Like, okay.
Well, maybe that's what I'm saying. Maybe he watched the movie and he picked up on that. And he's like, I got to use this one.
Maybe he thought he was a lawyer. Maybe he'd get the whole the plot confused with that movie. He thought he was watching Gladiator, but he thought he was watching something with a lawyer, some movie with a lawyer, and he's like, Russell Crowe knows what he's doing. This guy knows what he's doing.
This guy knows
another person I can emulate.
This either that or he's like, okay, well, I'm gonna, even if I lose this trial, I'm a lawyer now. I can represent somebody else. I'll be back in court.
That's right. It won't be my trial. It
won't be my trial. Just the next one on my docket.
I'm so good that you'll be trying this other guy, and you'll say, "Hey, you're not guilty. You over there, you're not guilty."
Well, even the judge said at some point, you'd make a good lawyer in another life.
Yes, in another life, yeah.
And so she's really pushing it home too.
I mean, because he did do a decent job with some of the things. I think that the most experienced and winningest lawyer in the world would not have been able to get him off of this case. Like they would have just been like, plea, dude, just plea.
So to fill in the movie void, let's go at the John Grissom's The Rainmaker. Those are the two he confused, Gladiator
and The Rainmaker.
Yeah. So he should have listened more to Matt Damon and less to Russell Crowe. They're characters anyway. All right, so now
as long as it's not the Pelican Brief.
Yeah. So now moving to the jury reaction. So juries are made up of people, right? These are people that come in. They're trying to fulfill their civic duty. Few people want to draw a case like this for jury duty, right? I mean, getting yelled at by the defendant. What do you think their reaction was when they finally? So they're under this pressure. Right? They know the cameras, and the cameras are on them, but they know that a lot of people seeing them, and they really can't give each other looks in the jury box. Like when he says things, they have to be serious. Like, oh yes, we're paying attention to you. You have a good point. Whatever. What happened when they got to decompress alone and when they were deliberating?
I honestly, to me, it's really one of those where they were picked as jurors. They're coming in as any juror might be like, okay, I'm going to try and give this my all, except in other cases like jurors on the Scott Peterson case or something like that. Those ones were coming in going like, Scott Peterson's going to fry. But the jurors on this one, they had no idea what was going on. So I think they came in sitting down going like, okay, we're going to try this. The prosecutor gets up. Then they know that Ronnie's representing himself. They've been told it's a pro se case, and they're like, okay. And I think there's a natural tendency at that point to be like, he's the underdog. Like, I'm going to root for the underdog. The prosecutor stands up, gives his opening statement. We hear some evidence and things, and it's kind of a conflict for them at that point. It's like, well, I don't know. Like, there's evidence, but the prosecutor's going really hard at this point. And I want to root for the underdog, right? Because everybody loves to root for the underdog, mm-hmm. right? Like, there's so many movies where there's underdogs, and they, we love to see them win. So I think there was a sense of, well, I'm really going to try and keep an open mind about this until I see all the evidence. And then Ronnie starts screaming at them, and it's, nope, he's guilty. Mm-hmm. Like, I think that was it, right there. As soon as he started scowling at them and screaming at them, they were just like, nope, I believe all of the prosecutor's evidence, he's guilty. Done. And then they get a chance to decompress, and it's just like, he did it. And we got a week to go to watch things and see things, but I think after that he was done.
I can't remember what trial it was, but I remember reading a while back about some jurors were talking about a very easy, if you want to call it that, trial. Like really easy. Either it was not guilty or guilty, but they knew right away that what they were going to come back with. and they had decided in like 2-3 minutes. It was just like, right, guilty, right? I mean, or not guilty, whatever they knew. And they waited about an hour because they wanted to make it look legitimate. So they talked about other things, case related, but they knew what.
Yeah.
Right.
I have to wonder.
It can happen that way. That they can walk into the jury room and like no, and they just be like, okay, I gotta ask the question: guilty or not guilty? Show of hands. Right?
They were in there for what, 4.5 hours?
4.5 hours, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think they had lunch delivered to them during that time period too.
So, I mean, how many hours were they just, remember when he did that? Like, you guys remember this?
Do you believe this dude's screaming at us? It's like, and that scowl, like, what?
Was that 50% of the deliberations, maybe?
I don't know. I could speculate that it might have been more like 70, 80%.
70 to 80, that's reasonable.
They would have been like, show of hands, guilty. Okay, can you believe that dude yelling, screaming?
And they're eating lunch over it, and they're like, I can picture them just like being so
like, man, this
shocked
biscuit is good, but he was, damn, he was wrong. Man, and like I really, and Jen's just talking about like I really feel bad for his son and things like that. Like I think that was part of the conversation. But yeah, I think that the evidence was just so overwhelming in this case that it was as any prosecutor would say, this is the slam dunk. Like it was over before it started.
What did the prosecutor say? Something about mountainous. Mountainous amount of evidence.
Mountainous amount of evidence, and it was an incredibly high amount of evidence, and it really was like they had everything.
Yeah,
they had everything except maybe actual video recording of everything going down. But I don't think they needed it at that point.
If he was wearing a GoPro, it wouldn't have been any better case. Like, we don't even, we don't even need to see that.
He's got a body cam. He's got a body cam on as he's doing all of this. And they're like, you want to see the body cam footage? And there's like, no, we've got enough. We don't need that.
We had enough in the first 5-6 minutes. It's been all redundant from here. So if we could just move it along.
That's where I think that that insanity defense would have had a better chance. Like, I don't think he probably would have still been found guilty, but he'd have a better chance with that instead of just saying, I guess, if you'd had an attorney representing him saying, yes, he did this. This is the reason why. Mm-hmm. It was mental health issues. It happened because of this. And yeah, it's a terrible thing that happened, but he wasn't incapable of determining right from wrong at that moment. I think he'd have stood a better chance, especially a better chance of receiving a lighter sentence if they did. And they might have gone for, instead of first-degree murder, maybe a second degree. Possibly even down to a manslaughter, because that has happened instead of just a not guilty by reason of insanity. It's like, okay, well, we don't think he did it on purpose.
It's possible, it may be a lesser charge. It was first degree murder, as it turned out. We had arson.
But as it was, there was 2 charges of first degree murder, 1 charge of attempted first degree murder, 1 charge of arson, and a charge of resisting arrest without violence.
Right. Yeah, and it was first degree arson. So he was looking at a lot of freight. With the outcome of his trial. So with a measure of compassion for mental health concerns, he probably would still be looking at life. It might have prevented the death penalty, which we don't know if that's, at this point, we don't know if that's going to come in or not. Mm-hmm. My understanding is if one juror says no, then it's life. So I don't know if the odds are in his favor.
No, he got a life sentence.
Oh, he did get a life sentence?
Yeah.
Okay. So.
Yeah, the jury came back today.
Oh, they came back today? All right.
As of this recording, I'm looking at articles from Tampa Bay. Jury life sentence for Ronnie O'Neal III in Riverview Science.
All right, so there's an update right in the video. He was sentenced to life in prison without possibility of parole, so no death penalty.
Life without parole.
Yeah, okay. So good. So that actually wraps up the case. We don't have to worry about anything else in terms of something strange happening. Everything strange has already happened. Yeah, so I think this would be an interesting case if there was some way to explore the mental health issues. But I think it's over. I think we're never going to hear about Ronnie O'Neal again.
I don't think so. I don't think that we will, unless he finds a way to get an appeal.
Well, he will appeal, I'm sure.
Oh, he'll appeal, but that doesn't guarantee that he'll actually receive an appeal, or receive a retrial.
Oh, no, yeah, I doubt he'll get a retrial.
I doubt that. And his attorneys might try to say, well, he ineffective counsel, but when you choose to go pro se, you're waiving some of that. Like, you can't really...
Yeah, I don't think that's available to him. But if he could make that, if that was an argument that was permissible, he would have a great case.
Yeah, he would.
Great case.
Was there? Maybe it was just speculation, but wasn't there talk about him having some kind of mental health evaluation done? You guys
Yeah,
heard anything
for
about
the
that?
penalty phase. Yeah, but I wasn't aware that testimony was available. I didn't see anything on
Yeah.
that.
I didn't
So
see
maybe that
anything
is
about
something
that.
that'll come out. Maybe.
I believe that one mental health professional is supposed to testify at the penalty phase.
So maybe we'll hear.
I don't know whether that happened. I mean, they've already made a decision for his sentencing, but I didn't see anything about that other than he chose to be represented by an attorney for that phase.
Right.
Like the judge said to him after reading the guilty verdict, she said, "You really want to have an attorney for the next phase," and he ultimately ended up deciding to have
The next day
representation.
he came back and said, "Okay." Yeah. So, all right. So that case wrapped up. Very unusual. I doubt we'll see one like that too often with somebody proceeding pro se and
we probably won't see hair like that in a courtroom.
Yeah, there's like there was an old movie, Clash of the Titans, and I think it was remade some years ago. But
Yeah,
I'm going back to the '80s for the good one.
Yeah,
They
the
had
Ray
a character-
Harryhausen special effects,
Yeah, stop action.
the stop action skeletons.
There was a character Medusa, which I know predates even that. It's ancient Greek, but she had the snakes coming out of her head, and you couldn't look at the snakes, or you turned to stone, but you could look at reflection. Yeah. And I couldn't help but make that comparison when looking at Ronnie's hair. What was going on?
I don't know, it was definitely a bold decision to wear his hair that way in courts. Not a decision I think I would have made, but
It almost looked like his hair was trying to escape.
almost it. I've seen that in other areas. We'll probably talk about him on Alien Lizard Humanoids, but Georgios Tsoukalos who's a meme at this point. He's the crazy hair guy from Ancient Aliens. Like his hair is just straight up. Like it was aliens. Like everybody, if you've been on Facebook, you've seen the meme. But like I think that his hair is trying to escape from just his crazy thoughts too. So maybe it's a thing amongst like the super crazy. I don't know. I don't like to label people with crazy just because it can be a harmful. A stereotypical word, very derogatory, but it was the Ronnie O'Neal case was definitely a different magnitude of case. It was definitely a different thing. Like if it hadn't been for the screaming, if it hadn't been for the hair, I don't think we would have heard about it.
No,
Even with the pro se, I think we wouldn't have heard about it. But the screaming and the hair and the cross examination of his own son. Really, I think that really propelled it to the national circuit. That's why we're talking about it here.
Mm-hmm. Whoever did the hair, though, I mean, that's some talent.
It's some good hair.
I don't know how to do anything with hair, and I certainly don't know how to do that. So I'll say
it was
talent.
consistently styled.
Yeah.
Right. Throughout the entire thing, it was the same every day.
He definitely.
I can't say the same about my own hair.
He had that going for him. So maybe jailhouse lawyer won't be his occupation in prison, but he can offer a consultation on hairstyle.
There you go.
He's definitely not an Andy Dufresne.
That's right. That's right.
That's the quintessential jailhouse lawyer. Andy Dufresne.
All right.
Shawshank Redemption.
I think that movie was. I thought I saw somewhere that was rated like the #1 movie of all time. I think on IMDb.
One of the greatest movies of all time. Yeah.
It's amazing to me. I thought it was a good movie, but then like greatest movie. Of course, it's always hard to pick the greatest of anything, right?
I mean, Shawshank is like always on TV somewhere.
Yeah, I think I would say like Saving Private Ryan. I mean, in contention for a top movie.
Back to the Future. Back to the Future.
Back to the Future.
Greatest movie of all time.
Yeah, and there are people who say that is the #1. Yeah, absolutely.
I think I personally one of my favorites. Absolutely one of my favorites.
Yeah, very
That
tight.
and Star Wars. Star Wars, of course, greatest franchise of all time.
I think the original Star Wars. Yeah, definitely in contention for.
Unpopular opinion. I hate Star Wars. I
Really?
have no
Get out.
interest in Star Wars at all. And I knew Mike.
It was nice having you on the podcast.
See you guys later.
It's like next time on the murder part, we won't have Jeff.
Host number 3 is gone. Mysterious?
It's like we might have another host number 3, but Jeff will no longer be here.
Don't investigate it.
Star Wars is
Don't
one
look
of
too
those-
deeply.
Star Wars has a bit of nostalgia built in, so it's not necessarily only the quality of the space western, so to speak, because that's really what it was. It's the experience of the time when it came out. I saw it when it first came out in the theaters, and it first came out in '77, but it was in '78 when it really caught on, if I'm not mistaken. And that's when I saw it, and everyone was seeing it. I mean, there was nothing like Star Wars. anywhere. Now there's like Marvel Studio and like there's a lot of competition, like Pixar and great production companies that have like special effects and all CGI. But in 1977, 78, there was nothing. Star Wars was the only game in town. Battlestar Galactica would come in 1979. It was on TV for 78 and 80, actually, the 2 seasons. And it was pretty good too. But yeah, I think part of it was just what it meant to us at the time, kind of seeing that when it first came out. Mm-hmm. So it might be hard to capture. And I wondered about with the new movies, when a new generation come and sit down and be amazed by those movies like we were when we were young.
Sure, that's a good point.
Yeah.
I think that the most entertainment not the most entertainment, but some of the entertainment we get today is from watching people scream at jurors.
Yeah, I don't know if this is going to form a nostalgic moment, but yeah.
Yeah, I know. I don't think it's going to be a nostalgic moment, but it definitely was. It was entertaining to just. It was almost like watching a train wreck. Like you just can't look away from it. Like it was just so like, what is he doing?
It was cringeworthy, yet you stayed glued to the screen.
Yeah. It was definitely worth watching and worth paying attention to the case. Horrific actions taken by Ronnie O'Neal. And I'm referring to the ones in the courtroom, but the murder was terrible as well.
Yeah, as I said in my other video, he committed double murder and he murdered reasonable doubt. And I think maybe, what do you take away? Like, so to wrap this up, what do you take away from such a terrible case? I think I would say this is a lesson to all defendants. Do not represent yourself.
Now lawyers are essential.
Yeah, there's a reason they get the big bucks. So, also, I think it would have been a good idea to get an independent mental health evaluation. I don't know if that happened, but again, to your point, the insanity defense might have been. I mean, it would have given him a better outcome.
Yeah, probably could have given him a better outcome, but it is what it is at this point. And if we ever hear anything else about Ronnie O'Neal, we might be able to revisit. But that's the case.
Be curious if they televise his appeal hearing, like where he makes his case for another trial, assuming he does that.
So is he going to pro se then too? Like, if he decides to pro se his own appeal trial? Like,
if he is, I'm going to watch.
Like, we will tune in for that one.
Well, he learned his lesson between that and the next one to when he got the attorney. So maybe he'll learn his lesson for that one.
His mighty God, and I'm not to make fun of him, but his mighty God might tell him again, don't use a lawyer. Like, go for it yourself. And it really, it's a mental health concern at that point when he's making those decisions based on voices he might be hearing in his head. Mm-hmm. But we have no way of knowing that that's actually happening because we don't have an independent mental health exam. But
that's the missing piece. Yeah, and I fear that's what we'll never know.
Yeah, I think you're right. We're never really going to know what's going on in Ronnie's head, but we know what's going on his head.
Right. At least he gave us that gift.
Yes, he did.
So that's where we'll conclude on the Ronnie O'Neal case. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Mike.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you to the audience. Please put any comments you might have about this case, a really interesting and unusual case.
Please be kind in the comments.
So yes, please populate the comments with your opinions and thoughts, and we will talk to you soon.
And don't really go after Jeff in the comments for the Star Wars thing. I'm just saying.
I don't care if you do. I maintain my opinion.
Everybody has a right to like or not like Star Wars, of course, yes. So that's where we'll wrap up. Thank you so much.